Hello, my friends. This is Mike, and today is December 24th, 2020. And this is going to be a good one. um, obviously, if you're watching this, there is a tremendous story being told to the population of all of our human brothers and sisters, and one way or the other, we're all meeting it somehow. And this is my Christmas present. This is another story. This is a fantastic story, and this is not necessarily as an escape to take away from what is happening in front of our eyes. But in another way, maybe this is an escape, like an actual escape. And maybe that'll make a little bit more sense towards the end of this video. But before I begin, I want to express like my outlook. This is the way I see things. I'm not saying like this is the way things are. I'm just saying this is my story. We all have a context. We all have a lens. And so it's, I think there's a responsibility of anyone who is making media or stories or videos and sharing them that, for transparency reasons, you need to know where they're coming from. Just so you as a viewer can have an understanding of where they're coming from, so that when it comes through your lens, you know exactly what to do. Or at least how to take it, excuse me. So, my general outlook, and this is how it's always been, is that just outside of the grasp of human perception is, there's more. And I'm not talking about necessarily like the big story as to what life is all about. I don't know that story, but I think there are layers. And the layer which we experience our life in, just outside that demarcation, there's something else. And it's been, maybe it's been hidden from us. Maybe it is, maybe it's all a game that we're supposed to find it. Maybe we signed up for this. Maybe this is all a big con. I don't know that, but if you pay attention, there are a lot of clues. And I think that our I don't know if I want to say purpose, maybe purpose, but like as being humans on Earth is like figuring that out. And that's always been kind of like in the back of my meeting of reality, of day-to-day experiences. And, I've always kind of carried that with me, but I think now, more than ever, like at this moment in time, that attitude or perception is more needed than ever before. Perhaps I'm delusional. Perhaps I'm nuts. Perhaps I'm onto something. I don't know. But that's where I'm coming from with telling you this story. And it is not necessarily to change anyone's understanding or perception, but maybe adding to it so that you can begin to incorporate other, perspectives on your journey. So that's where I'm coming from. So let's begin this. All right, where are we? So we're going to begin, this is going to be a good story. So we're going to deal with like portals. We're going to deal with technology. We're going to deal with river magic. We're going to deal with glitches in the matrix. We're going to deal with Tataria. We're going to deal with all this sort of stuff. And it's all kind of grounded, or I'm going to ground this story in my own experience, particularly where I'm finding myself living right now. So before we begin that, I'm going to have this little preface, again, providing more context in terms of how I'm presenting this, and at least my viewpoint, if for any reason other than transparency. So, this little map here, this is me. Here are the fundamental truths, and these are they're infinite stories, but there's certain things which are not arguable, and so we're going to begin with those. I call those fundamental truths. Fundamental truth is that we're in a body, and we have a degree of awareness, of conscious. I'm aware I'm in this body, I'm thinking, and this is me. We're also aware that we're on something else. We're calling it Earth. Some people subscribe to a story that it's a sphere. Some people subscribe that it's flat. Some people subscribe that it's a simulation. I don't know, but I know I'm standing on something. I don't know what it is. And I also know that the sky changes, right? It gets dark, it gets light. We've got these lights. We've got all these different stories as to what they are. Maybe they're an accurate description. Maybe they're not. But nonetheless, we know that it changes. So we know that is something we can all kind of agree upon. And then we have to recognize that we have fundamental mysteries, things that we will never know the answer for certain. And so that is, whether we'll just call it Earth, we don't know where Earth is. You might say outer space, but what's outer space? Where is outer space? If you're going to have a mystical perspective, if you're going to have a scientific perspective, it's always going to come to an unknowing or a story based upon faith. I'm not trying to get to that answer. I don't think it's possible. Maybe it's possible. Who knows? But we're not going to know for certain, at least while we're in bodies. And I'm not suggesting that it's not an important question. I'm just saying, it's a mystery. We don't know where we are. We don't know how we got here. And we don't even know what we're supposed to do. And so that, to me, is something to be incorporated into our understanding of reality, as opposed to a problem of the human experience. So here is another slide. These are just maps. These are just ways of looking at experience, And so this here shows where there's an accepted reality, and we have our own personal accepted realities, and we also have our cultural accepted realities. And, I'm showing this as a circle, and then outside of accepted reality is called the realm of fantasy. And we have this demarcation, this line that separates reality from fantasy. And this line is changing. It changes all the time. And we can look at this from all these different sort of ways. You could look at it from something like, propaganda or history or anything, that creates our particular accepted reality. Or maybe it's something like more tangible, like the example which is often used is the 4-minute mile. There was once upon a time that human beings did not think anyone could run faster than a 4-minute mile. And then as soon as that was broken, that accepted reality, that was proven to be not true, well, then a whole bunch of people were able to run that fast. And I'm not necessarily saying that everything in the realm of fantasy can be true. I mean, maybe it can, maybe it can. I don't think I can jump out of my window and fly right away, but I don't recommend that anyone take that experiment. But just recognizing just kind of the nature of accepted reality in the realm of fantasy. And then that leads to the next slide here, which, we're now looking at factual and accurate reality versus accepted reality, and seeing that they're two different things. Here I'm showing it as a 3-dimensional shape, and this is a 2-dimensional shape. And what I'm trying to indicate is that they're different beasts, they're different things, and they're never going to line up. And that's just part of experience. I mean, just from this level of we are not going to know these greater questions. We have fundamental mysteries. This can never line up. And this is just part of the human experience. And when we accept that and we understand that accepted reality is, it's a quote unquote, it's a real thing, it's an experiential thing, but it may or may not have anything to do with factual reality. However, there is certainly a relationship between how accepted reality becomes our factual experiences. So here's the last slide I want to talk about in the preface before we get into the details of what we got here. And this I call the distribution map of sanity, eccentricity, and insanity landscape. And so what we see here is this is a bell curve, and this, the main part of it, this represents the mainstream understanding or the accepted reality of the majority of people. With this line from top to bottom, this represents the most mainstream understanding of what reality is. And, that could be believing that we're living on the back of a turtle, or this could be that, a particular line of science or a particular line of history is factual, and, everyone in your circle, in culture, is believing the same thing, and so this becomes the accepted reality. And what this shows here is that as an individual understanding of reality, as an individual's accepted reality moves away from this center line, as it moves out, from different standard deviations, then they go from the realm of eccentricity to insanity, regardless of which direction you go at it. And the point I'm trying to make here is that what insanity is, or at least how we define it as a culture, is ultimately a reality, an accepted reality of how things are that differs from what the majority of people think. And that's all that insanity is. And it has nothing to do with factual or accurate reality. It has to do with the group. And there's a corollary here that the more social currency one holds, the further they can go out and stay in this eccentricity model. If someone doesn't look crazy, if someone has money, if someone has persuasive communication skills, they can go a little bit further out. And so we take all of this in consideration, or I encourage people to take all of that into consideration when listening to stories, myself included, and also with your own stories. All right, so now let's delve into the details here. So, part 1, the new house, December 19th through March 2020. So if you have been following along and playing along with me for some period of time, you may remember in December of 2019, so a year ago, I started talking about how I moved where I was living. So this here is an Instagram post which I made. You can see it came out January 4th, 2020, and I tell the story about how, this Susquehanna River, how I was living here, and then I moved to Millersville. And that whole story was just this really strong synchronistic story about how that came about. And then I go a little bit deeper into this in this post, and I talk about during this time period. So I moved where I was staying here in Marietta. I had a lease up until the end of the year, and I started a new lease on December 1st of 2019. And so there was this 1 month transition where I went from this apartment to moving into this house. And I tell the story of the move. I moved into this house on the 1st of December last year, and I still, for the final month of December, was moving things over into the home. And the thing which brought the most amount of my conscious awareness was this bookshelf, which you see behind me. This picture is from my old apartment. And here it is, after everything was moved out. And what was in my mind, what had me like, concerned at the time, where I was putting my mental energy, is like, what the hell am I going to go and do with these 17 cinder blocks? Because I certainly didn't want to move them to the house. I was tired of moving. I couldn't just throw them in the back. And I was like, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? And that was like, that was weighing on my inner landscape, just from a very practical perspective. But the point I want to make here, the point I'm trying to make here is, I was thinking about cinder blocks. And then finally, right on December 28th last year, I contacted a friend who lived in where I was living here, just around the corner, and he had a need for those cinder blocks. He was like, yeah, you could drop them off here. You could bring them here. It was a block away. And that solved all of my inner concerns. So that went away. And on that same day, on that very same day, I went and I explored the back of the property, which the house which I'm standing in right now. It's a very unusual property. The lot is. It's really narrow, but it goes very deep. I don't know what the overall size is. Like, it may be like a half acre, let's say, but it's very narrow and it's very long, and it's unlike any of the other properties or lots which are in the neighborhood which I'm living in. So I moved in December, and I never went fully to the back of the place. I never saw how big it was. And then finally, on the day after I delivered all of these cinder blocks here, I went and I explored the full backyard. I explored the full backyard. In the very, very back corner of the backyard, this is what I found. I found this. I found this circle of cinder blocks. You see? They're not the same cinder blocks, but I was thinking about cinder blocks, and then all of a sudden these cinder blocks show up in the property which I was in. And I didn't even go into how I got into this property, which was just bizarre to begin with, but they're in this perfect circle, and I kind of went from this triangle, and this is the same number of cinder blocks. And so in the month leading up before discovering this, my mind was being oriented towards cinder blocks for whatever reason, and then I go and discover this. And this, my friends, this is kind of like the beginning of this year. And we know what this year has been like, but this is where it started with me. And we're going to come back to this circle. And the joke, I said this like tongue in cheek within the household, it was the joke, but a little bit of seriousness, because everything, we got to be a little bit, we can't take it too seriously, but the joke was, this is a friggin' portal. So if you had been following on the Instagram journey along the way, later throughout the month of the time period of January and February of 2020, I went through a whole bunch of other things. I talked about this sign which I made for the house, and I talked about how 2 cats disappeared, and the jokes were they disappeared in the portal. They were outdoor cats, never ran away, had them for a long time. And then when were these posted? This one here, this came out. Let's see if I can see the date. That was January 19th. This one here came out. I think this was part of the post also. This was 2019. And then on March 2nd, I did a presentation on the higher side chats, and it was really about this really interesting story with Kobe Bryant, the helicopter crash, a helicopter crash that happened 20 years earlier over Kobe Bryant's hometown. Then the number 57, Heinz 57, showed up, Skull and Bones, all of this stuff. Highly recommend people to go and listen to it. I think it's a fantastic, a really, really, really interesting kind of tale which was being weaved, excuse me. And then shortly after this is when everything began. You know, it was the Ides of March is when the COVID Kobe story, you know, transitioned. So that brings us up to through that period. And what I want to go and what I'm trying to showcase in the beginning is just like, you know, or the beginning of this story is this house, this land which I was, where my mind was, all of the consciousness, the stuff which we can look at right now through the lens of hindsight. So let's go on to the next part of our story. Millersville, the Conestoga, and water magic vectors. For those of you who have been following along with this past year, lots of interesting stories, going to the church, you know, all of the different trips, the house, which connected to Rudolf Steiner and all these sort of things. And we're going to kind of come back to that. But this is where it all began. It began the beginning of the year with me moving to Millersville. And so let's go and look at this a little bit deeper. First off, we'll go back here. For those of you who are familiar with the Susquehanna mystery, this here shows the three different colleges: Elizabethtown College, Franklin and Marshall College, York College, and they are perfectly balanced on this T-square right here, High Point Scenic Vista at the 40th parallel on the Susquehanna River. And right in here, right on this line, this is where we find Millersville, you know, and there's an implied fourth college. And, you know, this doesn't hit right there, but, you know, I call this the Invisible College, and, you know, it's going to get more interesting. So let's go back here. We're looking at the map, same map we just saw right here. This is where I was living in Marietta. This is Millersville. And now we can see Millersville's right here. And if you look closely, this blue squiggly line is the Conestoga River. And it's got like this kind of, it's got this sine wave, if you will, type of quality, these squiggles. And this goes back to this one. I want to go back to this idea of we don't really understand what it is where it is and what it is that we're experiencing life is. Like, we understand rivers and water, and we can understand the physical world from a very specific way, but it is my contention that there is a whole lot more to the story, that what we think water is and what we think rivers are and what we think all of this is there's much more to the story. So that applies to what we're looking at right here with the Conestoga River. And the Conestoga River is it's a relatively small river. It's also referred to, as they say right here, the Conestoga Creek. It's 62 miles long. It's tributary to the Susquehanna River. We could see where it dumps into the river right down here. But the reason I want to point this out, that though this is a small river, it's got it has a big significance within the collective consciousness. For those of you who follow along with the work I've been doing with Emily Moyer, you can see that on her YouTube channel. But a lot of what we are playing around with, or part of what we're playing around with, has to do with this strange connection that we're uncovering between Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is where I am, and where she is in the outside of Los Angeles, and particularly a town called Chatsworth. And one of the things, and what's important with the Conestoga, or how Conestoga is very well known in our collective consciousness, is the Conestoga. There's something in the story of the establishment of the United States, which is how those who conquered the West, who went west, they did it in something called a Conestoga wagon. And it was named, the Conestoga wagon is named for the Conestoga River. Its first mention of the Conestoga wagon was James Logan, 1717. It was named after the Conestoga River in Conestoga Township in Lancaster County. And this wagon, this particular wagon, was used by a lot of the settlers to go west. And so it's become this symbol of going into the new frontier. But if you go a little bit deeper, we can also see that that this thing called 1982 Space Vector Corporation, which is headquartered in Chatsworth. They were tapped by the Space Services Incorporation, SSIA, to fabricate and launch the Conestoga 1, which became the first privately funded rocket to reach space. So again, we have another instance of Conestoga being tied into new frontiers. You know, we think about SpaceX and Elon Musk as privatized space, but this is where it all began with this Space Vector Corporation, which we have this link between Chatsworth and California. But and we can go back to, this is where the Conestoga River is. It's right here. And this is where, you know, I'm finding myself. I'm finding myself right on the Conestoga River. So let's go a little bit deeper into what we have, and we're going to blow up this map a little bit more. Here we have the Conestoga River right here. We have this other little water system. We don't know what these are, you know. We only have some sort of gleam as to what a river may be or flowing water would be. And you know, this is where my house is. I'm like right here. And so let me quickly go and do a quick pause. I'm kind of showing where I live, and you know, there's if someone really wanted to find out where I lived or where anyone lived, they can find it out pretty much. And I'm going to go and show some weird stuff. And if you're watching this, you like the weird stuff, and you know, so we get like a bunch of weirdos, and I'm a weirdo, and I say that in the greatest way. But weirdos, they come up with their own rules, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. But I'm going to let all you weirdos know right now: don't come to my house. You're kind of seeing where I live right now. I'm not afraid of like the government knowing where I live, because they know where I live. But I don't want anyone showing up on my doorstep. If you want to contact me, if you want to have an interaction, you always do that by email. You could book a session with me, anything like that, but don't show up on my front door. I'm not going to be happy. So back to the story. So anyway, so Conestoga River, we've got this, it comes out right here, and this is where I live. I live right here, and we can see that there is we've got this like echo right here, and this is called the Little Conestoga River. And I'm just playing around with some ideas here. Let me go show you. I'll blow this up a little bit more. We can see this is where I am, and we're going to come back to this. This line right here, this road right here, and there's this strange like other road right here, and my house is located right here. I talked about the property. This is Google Maps, then translated into Google Earth. This is the same road. This is Penn Manor High School. We see it right here. And we see this whole grouping of trees. You can see most of the properties, they're not this long. This one's really long. They don't have this much tree coverage, but we have it here. And right in the very back, this is where we find that portal, if you will. So let's go on to this slide here. So we've taken this, and I've just drawn a line connecting. We've got this like, you know, this male, this is the male, this is the female, and they go together. The energy from the flowing water, there's a connection, there's a line there. There's always lines and connections, and you know, it's like a radio. So this is how a radio works. We're constantly bombarded by radio frequencies, and they're going right through us. And like, let's say you've got a radio tuner, a radio with you, they go right through you. But when you tune into it, when you put your radio tuner to a specific frequency, you know, 99.1, you know, what have you, if there is a broadcast on 99.1, and when you are in alignment with it, you pick it up, and then you're able to go, and then you are in contact with that particular frequency wave. It goes from just being like out in the ethers to like materialized in your experience. And so the same thing can happen right here. You know, we've got all of these waves that are happening, but as soon as you go and tune into it, and so with this, how we're tuning into this, in this example, we're tuning into it with just our consciousness, with where we're putting our minds, how we're seeing things, what we're going to link into. And what I'm linking up to is this line, this frequency we've got right here. We've got this outer peak of this part of the sine curve, and I'm connecting it to the masculine and the feminine. This goes right into there. We can see from the deepest part and the furthest part out, and this line goes right through. Remember, I showed you this like little intersection. It goes right through the portal. It goes right through the portal. So, you know, we're building a story here. We're going to take this for what it's worth. We're just like saying, okay, so that's interesting, Mike. Okay, that's, you know, you're pointing things out, but we're going to keep on building upon this. We're building layer upon layer upon layer of our story here. So we're going back to the Conestoga River. This here is Millersville, this white spot right here. And we see the Conestoga River. It goes and it empties into the Susquehanna River. And I mentioned before the Conestoga River, it has a significance, a name significance, if only because of the symbol of the quote-unquote conquering of the West was done with the Conestoga wagon, and then the conquering of the outer space frontier, at least for a for-profit reason, also has this connection to Conestoga. But Conestoga River has another connection, a little bit more tangible. And so we're looking at where the Conestoga empties into the Susquehanna River. We'll go right here. We'll go to this one. And we can see this is the Conestoga River, and it empties here into the Susquehanna. If you look closely, right there is where you're going to see the National Register, Big and Little Indian. And you can't read the whole thing, but what it's going to say is Big Indian and Little Indian rock petroglyphs, because submerged in the river are large boulders, and it has the highest concentration of petroglyphs east of the Mississippi. And this has been virtually ignored by archaeologists. I've talked about this a lot. I recommend, if this is new to you, go and look at Mystic Lancaster Part 1. I go into it from a lot of different perspectives, both from why this was significant to the Rosicrucians, the first Rosicrucians that came to North America, and also now we're going to go and I talk about how these the Susquehanna River petroglyphs were significant to Lochiel, and Lochiel is a teacher, heir, and guardian of the oral tradition of the Tolteca Chichimeca tradition. I go into this in greater detail in that video, Mystic Lancaster Part 1, but this is where he's talking about this particular part of reality. This right here, right where the Conestoga River hits the Susquehanna River. And so now we're going to go and we can see it comes right up here. And we're going to go and look at where this is the Little Conestoga and where it meets the Conestoga River right here. We can see this. This is where it takes place. Here's the Conestoga River, right next to Conestoga Boulevard. And we could see here that the Conestoga, it takes this line, it goes into a curve here, and then we have this is where the Little Conestoga meets it, this straightaway right here, and this is where all of these sine curve movements of the river are. And now we're looking at this map, this right here. This is where the Little Conestoga comes into it. This line here, I put a black line on top of it. And this X right here, if we look really close, let's see what we can get. This here is where these two, where the portal is. This is where the portal is, right in between these lines. This is the X marks the spot. And if we go and follow this vector right here, the vector of where the Little Conestoga and the big Conestoga meet, which is where these two are connected. And we follow the big Conestoga line. It goes and it points right back into the portal location. And this all originates right here in where Big Indian and Little Indian Rock, which is quite significant to Tlaquiel for a whole bunch of other reasons, and what the petroglyphs were marking, the significance of what they were in material reality. So again, we're building. I'm not going to any conclusions. I'm starting to show this story, this layer upon layer of, like, where these strange circles of cinder blocks are tying into my personal story, into the history story, into these other stories or histories of life on Earth, and particularly this situation. So let us continue on to part 3. Tataria, Pennsylvania's first normal school, and 5D consciousness. So let's talk about Tataria for a little bit. I like Tataria a lot as an idea. There's a lot of different ways which it's sliced and diced. There's one way which it's looked at, like Tataria is like literally this empire which has been covered up by history. There's the mud flood. And then there's kind of like Tataria has taken this general terminology of there being like another history which has been covered up, or another way which there has been life on Earth, another culture, a grand culture, which has been completely eradicated just through stories, just through the story of history. Like, it's been completely disappeared. And so I'm going to play with a lot of these different sort of ways of looking at Tataria. And a lot of the Tataria research, it comes from this. It comes from just like normal deductive reasoning of looking at photographs and looking at the history which we have been given, and then just like kind of asking questions like, this doesn't make sense. Like when we see these grand buildings in these cities, which supposedly were, the cities were founded or established like a handful of years earlier, and they were just wilderness. And then like 5 years later, these immense buildings are created, often by, the architects or people who've never studied architecture, and like, where did they get the materials, and like, how did this happen so quickly? And so that level of thinking, that type of thinking is applied. So I'm going to apply that to Millersville. All right. So let us go here. This here is a map of Millersville from 1894. And we can see this. It's pretty much like, there's no railroad along it. It's probably a railroad a couple miles, maybe like 7 or 8 miles this way. But this isn't a heavy populated area. The Lancaster City, which was founded 60 years earlier, is out this road. If you follow this road to the east, that's where it would connect. But this is where we have Millersville. And I want to go and highlight these buildings, which are shown in Millersville, these amazing buildings. This one is no longer standing. This one is no longer standing. This is standing, and then this is still standing. Let me come back to this. Remember, I talked about that L-shaped road? This is that L-shaped road. You see these trees right here? This is where my house portal is. It's right here, and we're right by this Tatarian-esque building, okay? Less than a mile away. So this was built right here. Here we got a close-up right here. This is where that L-shaped road is. The road which I'm talking about, which we can see right, where do I have that better? right here. We can see right here, this is where Millersville University is, and right down here is Millersville University. Here is that L-shaped road, and we're coming back to it right here. We can see how it all lines up. This is 100, and this is from 1894. So now let's go a little bit into the history of Millersville. So Millersville was it's a home of Millersville University, and Millersville University is the first normal school in the state of Pennsylvania. And for whatever reason, normal schools are what they're calling teachers' colleges. You know, this is how we make people normal, right? You know, this is how we get people. Let me get this up. This is normal. This is how we make everyone think in the same way. So, you know, we got the normal school is how we're going to teach the teachers. So everyone is thinking the same way. So the first normal school, it started out, it was called Lancaster. The Lancaster County Normal School was founded in 1855. The idea for it came in 1852. They were working from this idea from 1852. This is the history we're told. And then it went from this idea in 1852 to actually being built or going live, like having their first enrollment 3 years later. And if you've ever been involved like with a group which is trying to bring something to fruition, like a committee, like, you know, it takes time. You know, you come up with ideas and what's going to be our charter and what are we going to do, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. It's not like a quick and easy process. But so this, you know, this kind of makes sense, like from a time frame. Like it came up as an idea in 1852, and then it's established in 1855. And then we see right here, the first institute which led to the Lancaster County Normal School received major support from Thomas Burroughs. He's a big part of, I think he was the president of Penn State, and he gave them major support in 1893, January in 1893, so this is just 3 months later. And then after that, there was this guy, Lewis Hobbs. He was a popular teacher in Manor District. Manor District is where we find this part of Lancaster. This is really, really significant to where the Susquehannocks lived, where the Lenape lived before they went east, and it's where the Shanks Ferry people lived. This is one of the epicenters of Native American culture prior to the colonialization, the colonial period. And so Manor Township, so this guy in Manor Township, popular teacher, he lobbied heavily in Manor Township to become the more permanent training facility. And then this dude gives a plot of land in what's was known as Millersville. It was just for the most part, it was just farmland. And then that is where the Lancaster County Normal School was established, and then it was renamed Miller State College. I guess here it changed its name to Millersville State Normal School in 1859. This was the first teachers' college in Pennsylvania. So why am I telling you all these dates? Because if you're looking closely right here, as part of the history, this is where it began, 1854, in Millersville. This is it. There was nothing in Millersville. This land, this was just open farmland given to become Millersville University. That this was the first building that was built, and it was built in 1854. So remember, this began as an idea in 1852. They didn't even open up until 1855, but in the meantime, they have built this building. This building was built. And then the building is said to have gotten a handful of other additions over the next 20 years, and it turned it into this. So let's go look at this building. This is what we have here. Here it is. The original building was built in 1854, many additions over the year. It was originally constructed as the Academy building. We can see this is what they're saying right here. Here is the State Normal School of the 2nd District of Pennsylvania that sprang from a small academy established in Millersville in 1854. This is another image. We can see here, even in 1894, this is the middle of nowhere. How did they build this so quickly? Like, I'm not necessarily saying that they didn't have the capability of building a building like this, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't make sense, you know, for whatever reason, that they were able to go and get, how they get the bricks here, where they get all the workers. Right across the street from where I am right now at Penn Manor High School, they're doing a huge addition. They've been building this for 2 years. It is half the size of probably what this is supposed to be. And they've got all of the modern equipment, all of the cranes. Where are we? All of the cranes, you know, all of the trucks, all of the cement mixers. And they're not even nearly as quickly done as accomplished as what this building was built. Much less alone, like, why did they need to build a building so big in 1854 if this was just an idea in 1852? Like, who goes, you know, from nothing to like this instantaneously? Like, you know, this kind of fits the idea of what we're told about Sumer. Like, Sumer is the first civilization, and it went from being nothing to like having a fully established tax code in like 1 year. You know, this stuff just doesn't make sense. We could see some more pictures of Old Main. The Old Main had a lot of faces. It was torn down in 1862. The larger building was erected in 1854. And consisted of a 3-story brick academy building. In 1855, the next year, they added the L shape that we're seeing. November 5th, 1855, marked the start of the first session. Here's a picture of the building in 1854. There was nothing here. Okay, so the story doesn't add up. So, we're back to Tataria. What is Tataria? Is this Tataria? I don't know, but we're adding this to the layer of this, like, this portal, which I'm finding myself in, like all of this strange experience, which led up to me being here at the strangest time in human, or at least in human history of what we're being told. Who knows how many times something like this has happened, if something like this has happened before, but I doubt it, at least with the type of technology which we have nowadays. And the reason why I say that with the type of technology is because one of the things which is pointed out by a lot of Tatarian researchers is the fact that these Tatarian buildings, and typically when they talk about a Tatarian building, it's in a much larger city, and they're the city halls, they're the, you know, what became the train stations. They did not originally have bathrooms, right? You know, these were different types of people. They experienced life in a different way. And all of this goes into, you know, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, the idea of third dimensional versus fourth dimensional consciousness. And consciousness is an understanding of how we interpret reality. Reality comes into our minds and we see it a certain way and we interpret it a certain way. And consciousness is primarily just what we think is, or is highly connected to, our accepted reality. And our accepted reality is right here, and it's what's given to us, where from our normaling schools. Our normaling schools make us to see things in a very normal way. We all see things the very same way, and the way which we see things is what I call a fourth dimensional consciousness. Fourth dimension is defined as dominance over the environment and other humans. Everything which we do and understand reality has to do with dominance. And I'm going to say this is very different from what I call a 3D and a 5D way of consciousness, which is harmony with the environments and humans. I think 5D and 3D are different octaves of a harmonious consciousness, which is an inversion of the 4D reality, which we think is so normal. 4D is about warfare. 3D and 5D is about peace and harmony. Go and look at your history. When was it introduced? Warfare was introduced with the establishment of agriculture. Agriculture is total dominance over the environment, over the earth. This is what the earth is going to grow. Then warfare is total dominance over humanity. 3D goes by the law of nature, 4D the law of society. 3D only, or 5D and 3D only exist in fantasy. This is only exists here in the realm of fantasy. We don't actually see it as true. Well, we do a little bit. I'll explain in a moment. But 4D is our current world experience. True timekeeping is 3D, 5D versus this 4D environment which we're finding ourselves, which has us encapsulated. This is the reality which we're encapsulated in, which there's another reality just outside, and part of it is our artificial timekeeping. So let me go down, 4D, it's a master-slave reality. Pay to play, you need to pay taxes just to be in the game. You got to go, everything you have to pay to involved, agriculture, warfare, banking systems, computer technologies, all of this is based upon dominance in one way or the other. So let's go and look a little bit about 3D and 5D just to show the differences. 3D is framed by history, though probably more accurately, it's framed by what we call archaeology or anthropology, because we define it as the hunter-gatherer. It's a fantasy because we don't actually know it. They've just you go to a museum and they're going to go show you like a diorama of how they think people lived. I don't, if the Tataria model has any truth, maybe that's not the case. Maybe this is all fantasy. But nonetheless, what we're told about the hunter-gatherer experience was it was completely dependent upon the earth, followed by the law of physics, and it was in the food chain. And I'm going to suggest to you, and I'm not going to go too deep into it right now, but I've alluded to this in the past, this 5D reality, which is Tatarian, or at least as a concept Tatarian, and this is only framed by living in fantasy and mythology, it exists here. This line is the demarcation of accepted reality to fantasy. I'm not saying, as I said before, not all fantasy is factual, but we don't know exactly what fantasy is. What is delved in the realm of fantasy is actually factual. This is what the discovery, in my opinion, is all about. And these are what all these clues are all about. And this is what I find exciting. So this 5D reality, it's framed by fantasy or mythology. The workings of Buddha, Jesus, ascended masters, Toltec sorcerers, the yogis, the Qigong masters. It's all hinting in another way of which people existed in harmony with the laws of quantum physics. Whether or not quantum physics is a bunch of bullshit or not, this is how they're telling us they lived, because these are all just stories, but it's independent of the earth and it moves outside of the food chain. So let's go back to the Tartarian buildings, which is like, why didn't they have bathrooms? Because these guys did not receive their life force energy from food. But if you know anything about your Tartarian idea or hypothesis, it's that the architecture of the buildings was supplying energy. And it's never really expressed much of what this energy, what the Tartarian architecture is supplying is. I don't think that they were plugging in, they built these Tatarian star fort cities so that they can go and plug in their laptop. My guess is that they were supplying energy from the atmosphere, from the earth, life force energy in the most literal sense, and that's why these cats living back there, they weren't eating food, or they ate food in a very, very different and much less way of us. Food is the ultimate trap. I'm not suggesting stop eating, but there certainly seems to be a benefit if you incorporate an intermittent fasting into your dietary practice. But nonetheless, I'm getting a little bit off topic. So let me go return to our story. So I find myself in this Tatarian, I'm found myself in this Tatarian sort of environment, or at least seemingly Tatarian environment, with these mysterious buildings and these mysterious portals on this mysterious river, located ever so perfectly in between all of these vectors. And just, I don't want to go too deep into this, but those who remember when I told the story of cleaning out this building and how the owners of the building were the founders of the local Rudolf Steiner School, and how this guy was also the dean of the National Center of Homeopathy. They had a school from 1980 to 1986. The guy whose house this was in, if you remember this Instagram post, I made some videos about this in the summer of this year. The guy who this was all about, where did he teach it out of? He taught it out of... Dr. Henry Williams. He taught it out of Millersville University. So we've got another link. And homeopathy is all about energy and harmonics and another way of experience life, which I'm just generally referring to as a 5D consciousness and reality. So now let us return. Let us return to part 4. We're going to talk a little bit about Google Earth, CIA, and rips in the matrix. And so this is where I'm going to bring it all home. I'm going to bring it all home on this. So let's begin with Google Earth. I like to use maps, and I use Google Earth a lot. Google Earth is a very helpful tool, and I'm making an assumption that what Google Earth is showing me is an accurate representation, I'm trusting it that it is, but it is a representation of something. But nonetheless, let's just first thinking about this in a very here and now, 4-dimensional reality. What is Google Earth? Like the actual ability of like the coding to create this software which we use. Like if you've ever actually seen like one of the Google Earth cars, I don't know if they still go around, but about 5 or 6 years ago they were everywhere, and there'd be a little car and it would have like a thing on the top of it, and my assumption was it was some type of camera, and it was taking pictures of all around it, 360 degrees, whether it was taking like video, whether it was taking like still shots like you'd find in your iPhoto, I don't know. But all of that data was then somehow put into like something which then you were able to create Google Earth. And if you think about that, how that data, how those images were then translated into the tool which we were able to use, where you go into Google Earth and you can go and look 360 degrees and in instantaneous real time see all around, up, down, left, right, backwards, forwards, and then also where you are in greater spatial reality. It's amazing. Like, it's obviously happened, but this is very, very advanced technology. Like this is extreme technology. All right. So let's go into this a little bit. So let's go to the origins of Google Earth. So the origins of Google Earth, 2001. When else is it going to begin? That's when it all begins. The prehistory of Google Earth began in 2001 when a software development firm called Keyhole was founded in Mountain View, California, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Happened to be Google's base of operations. Keyhole specialized in geospatial data visualization applications, and the name Keyhole paid homage to the original Keyhole reconnaissance satellites, which were also known as Corona satellites. They were known as the Corona satellites, and they were used between 1959 and 1972. Google then acquired, so we're being told that this has nothing to do with Google, that it was done independently, and then Google acquired them in 2004. So then we go a little bit deeper. Who was doing this reconnaissance satellites? Like who else was doing the reconnaissance satellites? The reconnaissance satellites, the first Corona satellite programs, the imaging satellite program is launched 1959, and they were produced and operated by the CIA. Agency Directorate of Science and Technology. The Corona program was a series of American strategic reconnaissance satellites produced and operated by the CIA. There's our Google Earth. I also want to point this out, this little kind of like interesting thing. So Google Earth is a combination of Google Maps and like the satellite. So because you can go back and forth of the map and then of the satellite imagery. And if you remember the early days of the internet, the mapping, the dominant map programming was known as MapQuest. And then we can see right here, MapQuest, right around here, this is 2008, right at January 2008, is when MapQuest lost its dominance over of the mapping software to Google Maps. You can see this right here around 2008. The general public made a significant shift from MapQuest to Google Maps. I just want to point this out just because it's just kind of funny, but where's MapQuest from? Well, they were from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 1969, So, okay. So we know this, we go and we talked about we're seeing all this with Google. We tied this into our coronavirus. We see like Google Earth, Corona satellites. We talked about satellites with Conestoga. We see how all of this stuff is connected. I'm going someplace, people. If you've stuck around this long, I'm very excited because I'm going all the way out. I'm going to bring it all the way back in. But before that, if you are familiar with, any of some of my past videos, I've mentioned before that, I can find myself on Google Earth. This is Google Earth. This was taken, if you look closely right here. This is, can I get this up here? June 11th, right there. Bring this back down. And what we have right here, this is me, and these are my two boys. And I remember this very clearly. This is why I knew how to go look for this, because I remember seeing the Google car driving around taking pictures. And, at the time I was still like, my worldview was at least the beginnings of where my worldview is now. So like I'm looking at this, you can see my boys are looking at this as well. And to make this a little bit more interesting, so you look right here. Where does it say? If you're familiar with how Google Earth works, is it will tell you when you're looking on the street view, it'll tell you where you are. We could see that it is at 618 Hamilton Road in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And for those of you who know their sacred geometry, you know that 618 is the golden ratio. If you know what the golden ratio actually points at, it's the mathematic connection where everything is harmony. It's 0.618 to 1 to 1.618. The golden ratio is the only ratio in which it is in perfect harmony with the microcosm and the macrocosm. Maybe I'll do another video to explain that in greater detail, what it means. But what we do know is mathematically the golden ratio is where you connect to the different realms of reality. So we see that this has a golden ratio connection into it, and it's Hamilton Road. And if you've seen some of the other videos, I've mentioned many times about the significance of the Hamilton Watch, which is founded in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and how the Hamilton Watch is used in the movie Interstellar as the plot device explaining how this father is able to connect with his daughter through a watch through different dimensions in time. Like that is the story of Interstellar. And, this is, where do I got that? How do I go back to, here we go. And this right here, this is my own watch. Am I showing it right side up? No, I'm doing it right here. And this is my Hamilton watch. I've had this watch before I ever saw that movie. It's the same model, or it's a similar model. They made a special model just for the movie. And it's about cutting through the different dimensions in reality. Okay? I don't think I'm special, but I do think that I'm consciously looking for breaking through different levels in reality. And it seems to go and be supported by my experience. So this is what it's all about. And this is the grand reveal. This is what I want to go show you. This is what you spent this last hour and 4 minutes. You're waiting for this one screen, this one screenshot. So I'm going to show you the Google Earth shot, street view of the front door of the house which I live. And so the house which I live, the house which I live, the portal house, the house which is near Tataria, the house which has the Cinderblock portal, which is like in this perfect matrix of the Conestoga and the little Conestoga, or in the river which connects to the petroglyphs, which connects to the Conestoga satellites, and the satellites are connected to the Google Earth Skyhook Corona satellites, all of that. So this is how Google Earth is presenting my front door. And some of you may remember, this is what I showed this a little while ago. Remember this? Who here remembers this? This front door with the strange little dancing orb right there. This is the front door. You might remember this. Well, here's the front door in Google Earth. And look right here. Look really, really closely. Doesn't that look a little bit strange? Let's get this. Right here, right on the front door, there's a split. There's a rip. There's a rip in the matrix. And look, you can see like right here, there's a little bit of a rip right here. And we could see there's a little bit of a rip right here, however this is done, whatever their technology, but they're not showing it up here and they're not showing it down here. But right at the front door, they're showing this. So for whatever reason, whatever story you want to tell, whatever this technology is, and keep in mind, this picture was taken, let me see no, I don't think I can show it on here, but this picture was taken before I moved in. This wasn't when I was living in this house. This predates me living here. But we've got this rip. Every time I'm walking in the front door, I'm walking into different realities. So now let me go show you the flip side. So if you go and you look all the way around, and you turn around, look at this. We've got this again. We've got the rip back here. You're like, oh, well, maybe it's because they're moving. That's why I've shown this to some people. Like, oh, it's because they're moving. Well, one, go and look at all the other pictures of cars in Google Earth. It doesn't look like that. Sometimes you do see other rips in reality. And so I would suggest to go and do the research there as well. But let me tell you something. I guarantee this house was not moving. But let's go look right here again. We've got this rip. And we could see the distortion right here. But then look beyond it. There's no distortion. Look at the house right here. Look at the house right here. There is no distortion. It's only right here. And if we want to go and look from the bird's eye, this is my house. You could see this is the front walkway, the walkway which you see right here. And we see this. You can't really see, but there's a walkway that goes right here. There's a driveway right behind that. And we see those right here. Here's that driveway. Here's my walkway. And they line up. This is the front of that house. And you can see this is the same line. It is the same line. So that, my friends... That's my story for you. So, as we're being told these keyhole, satellite, corona satellite stories, trying to change reality, trying to create a new storyline for everyone to fall into place on. If you apply enough pressure, and if you look closely enough, you're going to be able to find the cracks. You're going to be able to find the cracks in the story. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about me that isn't special about everyone else. And so my holiday wish for everyone is to use this time, and we need this. You need to do this, because if you don't do it, you're not going to have anything else. To begin to re-look at your story, the stories you're telling yourself, and not just the story you want. It's not necessarily about like your desire of what you want your story to be, but look around at all of the clues that are in your life and look for these rips. Look for the other things which are pointing to some other reality, some other consciousness. It has to begin with a new way of looking at reality, because if you do not find a new way to look at reality and to experience, whether it's delusional or not, you're going to be left with another story. And it's the story which is being given to you, or at least being given to everyone around you. So there's my holiday wish. There's my holiday gift. I hope you found this fun. Don't show up on my front door. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Solstice, Happy made-up holidays, Happy made-up reality, Happy stories. This is Mike. I'm going out.